I mean, we're all so lucky to be part of the LGW community. I'm class of 22, so we don't have our name yet, but we'll have a class name soon that I'll be able to use when I introduce myself. And what's pretty fun about LGW is actually you get to see so many people who are doing amazing things from different walks of life. And I'll show you in a second a couple things that I spotlighted on LinkedIn. But I want to focus today not on super nitty gritty, how to log in or how to add contacts or any of that. I can direct you to resources for that. And in fact, I have a great resource at the end of this deck I'll share that's directly from LinkedIn about optimizing your profile. I want to talk a little bit more about how this platform has changed and how we can really use it effectively as leaders. So that's why I call this from chief executive to chief influencer, because I truly believe that the leaders of today, they have learned how to influence and connect with their teams, their customers, their markets, and they're doing that in different and exciting ways. So that's what we're going to focus on today. Lots of examples. And then even at the end, we're just going to switch over to be live in LinkedIn, which I know those live demos, it's always a little bit risky for me, but we can get questions from people, go in and show you how to do actual stuff you're looking for. So you got a nice intro and bio for me already, co-founder of Social Driver. I chair National Digital Roundtable, so I get to bring leaders together for discussions about these things all the time. And I teach at George Washington University School of Business. So when I took a look at LinkedIn as it relates to LGW, I mean, it's kind of no surprise that this was such a well-attended event. So many people registered because look at what we see. We see members of LGW, my class, and others from other classes. We see leaders like Mahan just sharing what they're doing and using some of the best practices on LinkedIn. And you might sort of wonder, why do some posts do so well? They get seen by so many people and they get engagement. And some posts, they don't get that much engagement. Well, it's a little bit of an art and a science. And I'm going to share a formula with you that you can apply when you're creating a post on LinkedIn. 4 different sort of steps that you can think through to help make sure you're maximizing engagement with your audience to get the sort of results that we see from our fellow LGW members right here. I also want to give a shout out to Mark. Thanks for sponsoring today. Shared Humanity Project and the National Plan to End Poverty are really wonderful initiatives. And he had turned sort of lemons into lemonade. He had a bike accident and he took a picture with the folks who were helping him to recover from that. And gosh, Mark, this post got almost 1,000 reactions, likes, and so forth. And so we see that sometimes on LinkedIn, we want to share about a recent work initiative, but sometimes that vulnerability and just talking a little bit about what's going on with our lives really, for some reason, it connects with people, as we could see here. And so many people, hundreds in the comments or over 100 in the comments were, wishing Mark well and checking back in on him. So Mark, we're glad though that you're recovered and, that you got a little viral moment out of, that, making lemonade, I guess, out of lemons. So today, there's 3 takeaways that I want you to leave with at the end. I just always want to start and preview those at the beginning. The first is when we use LinkedIn, I want you to start at the center. I don't want you to think of this as a platform that you're broadcasting to millions of people. I want you to think of this as a platform that's focused on the folks who are at the center of your bullseye, the center of your network, those who really have trusted relationships with you already. And of course, our LGW community is a great place to start. The second is I want you to learn the lingo a little more. In my industry, I feel like a lot of folks, they like to use these fancy terms and can try to seem like there's some magic that maybe there isn't there just by using vocabulary that's advanced or different. There's just a few basic things that if you learn how to do a little bit better on LinkedIn, such as mentions and hashtags, it's going to make a big difference. So I'm going to make sure you really understand that, demystify that for those of you who may feel a little uncertain there. And then last, a little time can go a long way on LinkedIn. And I'm going to show you how you can just spend 5 minutes a day engaging with and nurturing your network. So those are the key things that we're going to cover that hopefully you'll feel comfortable with at the end of our time together. So as we take a step back, I want to think about, why LinkedIn? Why should we use this platform? When I started using LinkedIn, gosh, I mean, it must have been almost 20 years ago now, it was really just a modern Rolodex. It was just a way for me to connect with people so that, I could keep track of them and who knew what would come of that. Well, now, as I think we've all learned, LinkedIn has moved so much beyond that. It is really a powerful network. And so there are different reasons that each of us may want to use this platform depending on our own goals. But I like to think of it as kind of a networking event. This is a picture from one of my favorite events in town, the Book of Lists that the Washington Business Journal does every year. They have one coming up at the Reach at the Kennedy Center that I'm super excited about on the 17th. And when I go to the Book of Lists, I probably behave in a similar way as some of you, right? We go in the room and maybe we look to the bar first to get a drink, and then we say, okay, who do I know? And maybe it's your best friend, or maybe it's somebody you don't know that well, but you're probably going to gravitate to somebody who you know. And then as you approach that group of people chit-chatting, you're not just going to burst in and go, hey, here's what I did today. You're going to listen to what they're talking about, and you're going to join the conversation where it's appropriate, right? These are the normal behaviors that all of us have when we go to these types of events. And then if we have a good conversation with someone, maybe we exchange business cards, maybe we follow up with them and we do a personalized note when we follow up. Well, that's really how I want you to think about LinkedIn. I don't want you to, go to the corner of a room with a megaphone and just start telling everybody what you're working on. That would be weird at a networking event, and it doesn't work that well on LinkedIn. Instead, I want you to emulate those behaviors of starting with people you already know and trying to build those connections by joining conversations that are already happening. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish, there are different ways that you can use LinkedIn. Some people want to keep up with people who they already know, like colleagues, former classmates, clients, reach people who aren't on other platforms like Twitter or Facebook. In my case, I kind of like that LinkedIn, I'm a little bit insulated from some of the crazy conversations I see on other social media. I don't know about you, but the crazy relatives that kind of annoy me on social media, they don't tend to be on LinkedIn as much. So it's a nice safe harbor for me. We can use it to stay on top of industry trends, our peers, our competitors. And one of the things that's really simple we can do is to follow people, companies, and follow hashtags. So, if you work in marketing, you can follow the marketing hashtag so that you start to see stuff in your newsfeed from your connections, but also from others who aren't connected to you. We can advance causes we care about. I know, especially in this LGW community, we're also civic minded. This is a really great way to talk about what we're doing outside of work and how we're improving the community. We can showcase our work or our company's work. We can help reporters find us. This is really important for some of us. I used to be on the board of the National Press Club, and I would train reporters. And one of the things I found is reporters really like LinkedIn as a research tool because it's easy for them to get a lot of social proof really quickly. They can see your professional background, your recommendations, what you're talking about. Some people put up a website to make themselves look like an expert, and they're not really an expert. But on LinkedIn, it's a bit easier for the reporter to do some cross-referencing or even find a mutual connection to say, what do you think about this person? We can, of course, educate our clients about our work. And then I think right now, more important than ever, we want to endorse our company as a destination workplace because, recruitment is something that most of us are really focused on right now. And this is a great opportunity to show potential recruits what your company's like and give them a real sense of that through yourself and through your team members. So I said start in the center, and I really want to kind of hit this point. If you think of your audience as a bullseye, maybe there's thousands and thousands of people in that audience. I want you to go to the center of that bullseye and say, who already trusts you? Who are your colleagues, your former classmates, partners, who you really have a deep relationship with, that they're kind of on your side already? And think of that as your target audience for LinkedIn. I don't want you to think about it as the platform to talk to strangers. I want you to think about it as the platform to talk to your peers, probably some of the people who are in this discussion today from seeing the names that were familiar to me in the chat. Then as we go a layer out, these are people who maybe know and like you, but they're not quite in that trust zone. And you can use those trusted contacts in the center to kind of pull people in. When somebody who trusts you interacts with you, if they're friends with someone else, they're connected to them on LinkedIn, they're more likely to see that content. And you'll see some examples of this happening in the comments in a second. And then, if you go out further, be people who should know and like you, but they don't yet for whatever reason. And again, this is a great way to start to bring them in through people who are connected to you. Now more than ever, people have a mistrust of brands. We have a real trust challenge that we're facing in society right now. And people are more likely to trust other people. And so if your organization or your company wants to make its mark through LinkedIn, it's kind of like if CNN called, you can't send your logo, you have to send a person, right? Well, on LinkedIn, your company page is not going to be quite as effective as a person can be. The platform is different from other social networks because it's built around people. So who's at the center of the bullseye? One of the things that I want you to really think about is even make a list. Who are the 10 people at the center of the bullseye that, gosh, if you could see them for lunch every week, you wish you could, but because of time, because of geography, you can't. And then think about what you can do on the platform to focus on those folks. Also happy to see Mary Abijay's point reinforcing about reporters. Absolutely, she's getting interview requests through LinkedIn. So just kind of shows us in our own community that plays out. Now, when I think of marketing, I think of this shift that we've all seen, in the golden age of media, everyone kind of gathered around and participated in the same event at the same time. And now we know it looks so much different, right? We have people gathering around, but maybe they're all doing their own thing simultaneously. They're using multiple screens. Everyone's kind of choosing their own adventure. So the mindset that I'd like us to shift when we think about any way to use digital marketing is to go from being a storyteller, which worked in the golden age, to being a story driver, which is what I think we have to do in the digital age. In the golden age, it was all about reaching the biggest audience, but today I want to engage the best audience. In the golden age, it was about seeking celebrity limelight, maybe that one spokesperson, but in the digital age, I want to shine light on my own influencers, right? We see some love going back and forth in the chat between Mary Abijay and Carrie Hatch. They are one another's influencers. When they shine the spotlight and engage with one another, it helps them reach more people. That's a perfect example of a digital age strategy of story driving. We used to want to focus on starting a conversation, but now we want to see what conversations are already happening, even small micro conversations, and how can we join them? Content used to be focused on really general, long form and polished content. In DC, we still see a lot of white papers being produced, but on social media, specific, snackable, authentic content tends to work best. And that's really important when we think about LinkedIn. If we try to post something that's too generic, the artificial intelligence sometimes doesn't know what we're talking about. We have to get really specific and we have to use hashtags to teach it. We're going to talk about that in a second so that you know how. And then lastly, we used to focus on watching all the big players. Now I want to listen to niche players. Who are those experts in my industry that may not be huge names, but they have a following and people pay attention to them? Key takeaway here, and this is my little geeky Star Trek reference because I like Star Trek. When we're speaking on LinkedIn, we are not just talking to people, but we're also talking to machines. So this, of course, Data is our Android friend here. That means that anytime you post content, yes, I want to know what Mark and what Debbie and what Doug think about it, but the algorithm is going to decide before those people ever see it, whether it wants to show it to them. So if you don't follow some of the best practices, that great post may never even get shown to those people because, of course, can't show every single piece of content to every single person. We're not on here all the time. So I really want to make sure we know how to speak to the algorithm and feed the algorithm so that we can be as successful as possible. Now, some of you on this conversation today are advanced on LinkedIn. I see what you're doing. You're posting videos, you're publishing articles. Mary's doing LinkedIn Live every Friday. And some of you are just getting started and you're going, oh my gosh, this seems really overwhelming. I don't have that much time. There's sort of 4 steps that I think we need to go through to build our presence on LinkedIn. And whichever step you're starting at is the right step for you. Don't feel bad. Don't feel that FOMO because, in marketing, we can always feel like there's always more we could be doing, right? Wherever you're starting now is great. And I just want you to have the information to just go forward a little bit more than you maybe have so far. So first step on LinkedIn is we want to establish our presence. We want to optimize our profile. And I'm going to give you a takeaway guide that you can use to do that. And I want to make sure you connect with the people who matter. If you haven't done this already, I want you to go into LinkedIn, and this is in the guide, and import your address book. If you're an LGW community member and you have 50 or 100 LinkedIn connections, I'm going to say, I don't think so. That does not seem like an accurate representation of your network. I know that you know hundreds of people, probably thousands of people. And the best way you can do that is you can either link your email account or you can download and import your address book so that LinkedIn can find those connections and you can add them. So I won't go through all the nitty-gritty on how to do that, but I will give you takeaway instructions if you're interested in that. The next thing that I want you to do is start to curate your newsfeed. If you log into LinkedIn and the stuff just doesn't seem very relevant to you, that means you need to teach the algorithm how to show you what matters. So what I want you to do is find key people to follow, find companies, maybe it's companies that you partner with, like your clients, it could be competitors, and follow them. When you click the follow button, it'll start to display things in your newsfeed. And lastly, I want you to find some key hashtags in your industry. If you work in marketing, maybe it's hashtag marketing. You work in finance, maybe it's hashtag finance, hashtag investing, and you'll start to see content. You're teaching the algorithm what you care about. The third step then is to start to engage with your audience. Notice we haven't talked about posting yet. That's okay. You can be very successful going through this process and you haven't even posted yet. I want you to keep in touch with your community. First with private messages, somebody's birthday, it's a work anniversary, they get promoted. Send them a message. You don't have to send that message on LinkedIn. I'll see somebody gets promoted on LinkedIn. I might text them to congratulate them, but you'll use LinkedIn as an intelligence source to tell you these things. And then I want you to interact with their content. I want you to like it. I want you to comment on it. And I don't want you to just say, way to go. LinkedIn is going to reward you and people are going to prefer it if it's a little bit more in-depth than that, right? A little bit more substantive. Again, we've never even written an original post yet. We're just seeing what other people are saying. We're joining the conversation. You can be really successful at a networking event by joining other people's conversations and not being on stage or starting your own. And then the fourth step is to start to grow our influence more. Regularly create content like posts. Videos and photos perform much better on LinkedIn than just sharing a link to another website. In fact, LinkedIn kind of doesn't like it if you try to get people to visit a different website. So when you post your press release, usually it's going to show that to fewer people than if you put that content directly on LinkedIn. Believe it or not, a photo from your iPhone of your press release will perform better on LinkedIn than you linking to the press release on your website because LinkedIn wants to keep people there. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit. And then you can join relevant conversations through groups like a LinkedIn group. I think there's an LGW LinkedIn group. I'm sure alumni groups that you're part of have LinkedIn groups. And then you can even search to find conversations about your industry, things that strangers are talking about, but who you might want to meet, and you can engage with them. So we'll share this as a takeaway. I saw some people asking about that. And we'll make sure that you have this so you can see where are you in the process, and then just what are a couple more boxes that you can check to move yourself forward. Now, I want to show an example. He knows I have permission from my friend Alex Werfinger to show this, but we have this formula we call the story driving formula. How do we go from storytelling to story driving? There's 4 things that we want to go through. And I'm going to dive into the formula a little more later, but I wanted to preview it up front. There's 4 things we can look at, and you can see 2 posts from Alex and how well they performed, and you see a really clear example of this formula. Notice the post on the right. He did a wonderful interview with my friend Carrie Fox on her podcast, and his post is really short. He just says, Carrie Fox, such gratitude for including me. Now look at this. The asset is the logo of her podcast, which, text doesn't always pull us in too much. What's the story angle? It's I don't know why I've listened to this episode other than maybe I like the 2 of them. I don't know what they talked about. Amplifiers. Did he include any other people or organizations who might see this, mentioning them and go, oh, I'm going to like it, I'm going to share it? Only Carrie. And avenues. We call avenues sort of the term for hashtags and keywords, and he doesn't use any here. Well, this was a real missed opportunity because Alex and Carrie talked about Jubilee Housing, a wonderful affordable housing group in DC that Alex is the board chair of. Now, if he mentioned Jubilee Housing, when I say mention, not just type it, using the @ sign so that they get mentioned, they get notified through their notifications, or other board members or staff, do you think they might have wanted to congratulate or like the post from their board chair? Maybe. If he had used the hashtag affordable housing, it could have displayed that to other people who are paying attention to affordable housing. But those ingredients were left out. It probably would have just taken a couple more minutes. Versus look at the post on the left. This is about the CEO of the Year award that the Business Journal did. He mentions Jose Andres. He mentions Think Food Group. He mentions Kathy Hollinger. He uses the hashtag for the Restaurant Association. And look at the difference. I don't know if you can see it because it's kind of small. The post on the left had almost 200 reactions. The post on the right had 7. Literally a 20-fold increase by just following that formula. What are my assets? What's my story angle? Who are my amplifiers who I'm mentioning? And what avenues and hashtags am I using? And I know that this can seem like a little bit daunting, right? But and I saw this post come in from a comment come in from Russ. Russ, if you're writing one post once a week and you're sharing a great story that's happening, I'd argue that once you get into the rhythm of it, it's not going to take you that much longer to sit back and go, wait a minute, who else can I elevate and shout out and mention in this post? What are one or two hashtags I can use that are relevant? It's not going to take you that much longer to do that, because we don't need to be posting multiple times a day. This is a platform where you can do it every once in a while. And again, you can even just engage with other people commenting on their things. You don't have to start by doing it yourself. So I'll show you some more examples later, and we'll talk more about the ROI, Russ, which I think is a really great question. But this is just a snapshot showing you the formula at work. Following a few best practices can make a really big difference. I'm sure you all have this for if you go into a sales meeting, right? You know that if you use the right vernacular, you connect emotionally with your audience, you have a few of these things you've built up and it makes a difference. And that's kind of what we're looking for here. I'm going to show a great example of something I did recently, really quickly, that had a really nice outcome for somebody I was talking about. So you'll get to see. Absolutely, Melissa. Getting in that mindset of story driving is what I'm looking for. Now let's talk about some of the best practices on LinkedIn specifically. And I see a couple questions in the Q&A, and some of this stuff we're actually going to get to in a second, and then I'll circle back if we don't get to them. First lesson, I love this post from a couple years ago from Dolly Parton, this meme that went viral. She sort of reminded us that, every social media platform is a little bit different. We can't treat LinkedIn the way that we treat Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And so I want to make sure you understand some of the mechanics of LinkedIn and how to optimize what you're doing on that platform. Number one is LinkedIn year after year has been rated the most trusted social media network. Here's the thing that's a little crazy. It actually comes in as more trusted than many media sources, which means if you share an article from your company or yourself on LinkedIn, content about something happening, people may be more likely to trust it there than if you got a media hit in a publication that they don't necessarily respect at that level, So that's a very powerful thing. LinkedIn really connects with people. We tend to trust information on LinkedIn versus, notice Facebook ranks number 9 on this particular ranking. The Senior Director of Product Management, LinkedIn, used this line that I think is something we all need to remember about LinkedIn. He says it's people talking about things you care about. And you can see on the right, that's just a screenshot from my app. People's content performs better on LinkedIn. I'll see companies say, well, I'm posting every day on my company page. And this came in as a question from Brian about company page and group pages versus individual pages. A company page never reaches as many people without advertising as a personal page does, because LinkedIn is optimized for people. So I want you to remember that. Your strategy cannot be successful if you do not make people part of your strategy. Just like if CNN calls, you can't send your logo, you got to send a person. I need you to send people to LinkedIn to be very effective the way they build their personal brands and their professional brands there. But also the second part of this phrase, talking about things you care about. LinkedIn's artificial intelligence learns by what you click, what you like, which hashtags are in those posts, which hashtags you follow. It learns what you care about. And when it learns those things, it starts to feed you things that it thinks you will care about. So if you're all over the place talking about different stuff all the time, it might be hard for the algorithm to know what to do with you. A lot of the leaders on LinkedIn, what you'll see them do is they're very focused on topics. And those may be big topics like inspiration, or they may be niche topics like, virtual reality. But they decide what they want to talk about and they emphasize that. Now, when we look more at this, what it means for you, it means content that comes to you in your notifications is more likely to come from people, and it's more likely to prioritize things that you have been engaging with and talking about already. When you do anything on LinkedIn, any activity creates a piece of content. So when Mark posted that photo of himself with the person who was helping him recover after the bike accident, and someone comments, the comment on Mark's post is actually a piece of content in LinkedIn. And when someone likes the comment, that like of the comment is a piece of content. Every time a new piece of content is created, it's like pushing the gas pedal or the brake pedal, depending on what happens. So when you post something and lots of people comment, way to go, great job, good promotion, gas, 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 it shows that to more people in your network. If you post something and people don't react, or they react negatively and they say, hide this post, brake. They put the brake on and they don't show it to as many people. So it's really important to remember that if you want to engage your network, you need to play ball. You need to like things. You need to comment on things. You need to share things. And you also need to figure out, am I sharing things that other people would care to engage with? Or am I sharing things that nobody has anything to say about, and then I don't get that reaction? When your content is posted, before it's ever shown to a person, it goes through, you can see this flow chart here, it goes through a scoring mechanism where LinkedIn says, how good does this seem? And again, if you use that lingo, LinkedIn will score it well. But if you don't use the lingo, LinkedIn will score it poorly, and it just won't show it to very many people. And you don't get the opportunity for that reaction. So what do I want you to take away from this? I want you to remember that everything you do is looked at by the machine before it's shown to people. So if you just follow a few little easy steps, mentioning the right people, using the right lingo like the hashtag, making sure to share photos instead of links, you're going to get more traction. You're going to be pushing on the gas pedal. Now, there's a key thing that you have to do this. And it sounds so simple. Some of you know this, some of you don't. But notice when I'm typing in the box here, I type the @ sign and I start typing Washington Business Journal, and then I select it from the list and it turns bold. I'm doing the same thing with Alex Orfinger. I start typing his name and then I select him from the list. And then I can do this with a hashtag as well. If whatever you type doesn't show up as bold, it means that it's not linking to that appropriate page. It doesn't, I could type the words Washington Business Journal, but LinkedIn doesn't know that I mean that entity unless I type the @ sign and I select it. This is different from Twitter. If I type a username on Twitter with the @ sign and I copy and paste it into Twitter, Twitter automatically knows that @AFShop is my username. That means Anthony. But on LinkedIn, it doesn't. You have to actually do it manually. I saw a post from an executive at a big Fortune 500 company that we work with, not somebody we work with directly, but a different department. And he had this great post about their charitable giving and all this stuff they did. And you could tell it was copy and pasted because it just said @ this and @ that. They weren't bold. They weren't linking. Those groups were not notified. They would never know that he posted that unless he told them or they stumbled across it, and it didn't get much engagement. That's a simple thing that you can do as a busy professional. You can just make sure you're following that best practice. It's a small thing that makes a huge difference. When you do that, it teaches LinkedIn. These are things you're talking about. So in this case, you can see a post that I did related to social media. I used the hashtag social media and it said, congrats, your post is trending in this hashtag. That means that other people who follow hashtag social media were seeing and engaging with my post. Now, if I had been talking about social media, but I hadn't used the hashtag, it's like a card catalog, right? It wouldn't know to index it that way. And it wouldn't know that that's what I was talking about. So you can only trend in a topic if you use the hashtag. So all I want you to do is just find a few hashtags that are relevant to your work. Just remember those and just use those regularly. And I'm going to show you how to do that research a little bit later. You can see LinkedIn will give you these notifications, in this case of this, great, your post is in the top 1% of engagement. And at the bottom, one that I didn't do too well, they said your post only has 28 views. Try mentioning someone in a comment to get the conversation going. See, it's telling me how to use the algorithm. Maybe you want to mention someone because then people will see it and it'll get the conversation going. So you can sort of listen to these things in the notifications on LinkedIn. Now, someone who I think does a great job is Johnny Taylor, the CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. So I wanted to show some examples of Johnny's engagement over the last couple of years that I think are really inspirational for all of us. Remember, LinkedIn is about people you know, talking about things you care about. Johnny has a lot of followers, but he doesn't even have half as many as SHRM, yet his posts get way more engagement. Why is that? Because people's posts always get more engagement than companies. So you can spend all the time in the world paying to grow the following of your company page, but you're not going to get the engagement that you could if you don't have your leaders engaged in using this platform. That is just how it works. So one of the things you'll notice when people write posts that are successful on LinkedIn is they don't look like tweets. They're longer. And you'll get these slides. I know you probably can't read all of this on the screen right here because of the text size, but you'll notice that, the one in the middle, it's about stress during COVID, and there's bullet points broken out in the middle. He has lots of spaces between paragraphs to make it easily digestible. This is one of those practices that we notice in writing for LinkedIn that's very different from how you might write an email or you might write a tweet, but it's very digestible and it's easier for both the machine and the people to understand what you're saying. You can notice here he's used hashtags. You can notice here he's mentioned SHRM as one example. These are things that make a real difference when you're writing longer posts. Now, when would you write a longer post? Let's say your company issues a press release about a big announcement. Rather than just linking to the press release and saying, check this out, what if you summarized the 3 key points into bullets and that you included that in a LinkedIn post so that I could read it right there? That's a small thing that you can do. It's not going to take you that much more time, and it's going to make a huge difference to who actually sees that. Because are you posting the press release to your website for nobody to see it? Probably not. You probably want people, especially those closest to you, to see the announcement. Another thing you can do is think about how to repost things, but not just recycle it, add your own touch. These are 2 examples of Johnny doing that. You can see that he has shared a post, one from Sherman, one from a team member when they sent pizza to everybody early in the pandemic. And at the top, you can see he's not just saying, check this out. On the one on the right, he's saying social eating connects us. So how can we share food while maintaining social distance? And then if you click see more, he's written much more. He's shared something, but he's added substance. Again, is that going to take you a little bit more time than just clicking share? Absolutely. But if you reach, versus the example we had before, right? 7 people versus 170 people, is that going to be worth spending a couple minutes writing? Well, probably is if you want to use the platform to engage your audience. You have to answer the question how you want to use the platform. We also find that photos and videos in particular captured from Zoom and iPhone work really well on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, both the algorithm and people reward authentic content. So yeah, you can repost your TV commercial to LinkedIn. Wonderful, that might make sense sometimes, but sometimes those lower fidelity, like an iPhone video, performs really well. You can see this iPhone video from Johnny, gosh, has over 12,000 views, has over 1,000 reactions. And it was just him talking to the iPhone for a couple minutes about celebrating the holidays. Now, you saw examples of Johnny posting, publishing, producing, and I know that does take time to do. But when you go to the activity on Johnny's LinkedIn page, you'll notice that for every time he posts, he engages 10 to 20 times. That means that's really where I want you to do. For every time you post, I want you to like or comment or engage with someone else 10 plus times. That's what this platform's about, right? Just like if you were in a conversation in a networking event or at a dinner, it's not just you talking about what you're working on. You're going to be having conversations with others. And what does that look like? You can see here an example where he wishes someone a happy birthday in the comments. You can see on the far left here, how you treat your employees will determine the fate of your company. And his comment isn't just, I agree. It's, I agree. Workers are an organization's greatest asset. How you treat your workers matters, but it matters even more during a crisis, and it will be remembered after. And he goes on and on. He's added context. He's joining a conversation in a substantive way. The algorithm rewards that, and people reward that. The other thing you can do on LinkedIn that's very powerful, that some of you have done, but some of you haven't, many of you haven't, is you can post an entire article on LinkedIn. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean linking to the article back on your website or your blog. You can take that full 2,000 word article and you can write that article. Your LinkedIn profile has a blog attached to it, whether you know it or not. At the top, you just say write article. When you on the post box, there's a button you may not have ever noticed, and you add an image, you add a headline, you can write a full article, embed photos, videos. One of the things we find is because of your network effect on LinkedIn, often an article posted to LinkedIn, even if you've already posted it to your blog on your website, will get multiple times more views. More people read it on LinkedIn than they actually read it on your website because it's easier. They're there, right? They don't have to go back and click a website to find it. So I think it's really important to think about what are the strategies. And Amy, we can discuss kind of some strategies to maybe work through articles. I can tell you one thing is the articles that are over 1,200 words long perform the best on LinkedIn. So one of the things we really want to think about is it substantive? And then the second thing I want you to think about is when you share the article, are you using the hashtags that are relevant so that it shows up in the conversations that people are having? I had a kind of a funny, surreal experience where I, early in the pandemic, this crazy show, Tiger King, was on Netflix. And I was impressed by this unusual character, Carol Baskin, who had succeeded in reaching a ton of people even before the show was out. She had millions and millions of followers. So I researched her and I wrote this funny article about how Carol Baskin was killing it in marketing, which is kind of a pun if you know the show. And it ended up getting discovered by a bunch of people because people were paying attention to Tiger King. And it was an interesting angle on marketing. And even Carol Baskin found my article and commented on it, which I did not expect and which was sort of a funny thing. So you have to write the content that's long and it's going to work for the platform, but you also have to use the right hashtags so that that content is discovered by people based on what they're already reading. And Amy, that might be the issue we can talk about later. We're going to have a little time kind of after our first hour to do really like live Q&A and look at stuff live on LinkedIn. So to summarize the best practices that I've shown you so far through Johnny, I want you to remember on LinkedIn, content is going to perform better if you go deep and you go niche. Rather than writing something that's for the world, I want you to design something that's for the center of the bullseye in your network. That is going to use, it's going to be much more effective. And especially if you use hashtags to tell LinkedIn who are the people that you're trying to reach. I want you to drop the links wherever you can and instead upload an image, upload a video, write the article on LinkedIn, create a LinkedIn event. I was working with somebody where they discovered by not linking the event back to their website's registration and setting up a LinkedIn event on LinkedIn where they captured the registration there, they had way more engagement. They reached a lot more people. So I want you to drop the links where you can because the algorithm doesn't like them. I want you to repost and reuse and recycle as much as you can. What do I mean by that? I know that many of you have had somebody ask you an industry question and you have sat down and written a beautiful, long email that you're so proud of that really explains something. And the only two people who ever see it are you and that person. You know what? You could probably take some of that content from the email and turn it into a great LinkedIn post. You can recycle articles that you already have. You can recycle papers that your organization has put together and pull excerpts from them. You don't need to write something from scratch. You have great materials already. You can repackage that and make that fit the platform. But it's not just about talking. I want you to converse with people. I want you to ask questions. Successful LinkedIn posts often start with a question. I want you to join conversations that people are already having. I want you to mention people. Do those things, those natural things that you would do if you were at a networking event to invite more engagement. And then lastly, learn that lingo. Now, we had a question earlier about how many hashtags, et cetera. On LinkedIn, the best practice is really 3 to 5 hashtags. I have up to 3 on here, but 3 to 5 hashtags. Research shows if you do more than that, the algorithm thinks you're sort of spammy. This is different from Instagram. Instagram, you might use 20 hashtags, no problem. On LinkedIn, we want to stick within 3 to 5. And when you mention people and companies, we want to keep that to, roughly 5 is sort of a good max. If there's other people you want to mention, you can do that in the comments. So that's a way that you can add more, but getting around it. Or if you upload a photo, you can tag people and organizations in that photo so that you're not tagging them or mentioning them directly in the post. So we want to mention people, we want to use hashtags, but we don't want to go overboard. We're talking 3 to 5. That's really the sweet spot to not overwhelm the algorithm and to not seem spammy. And speaking of hashtags, these are some of the recent top hashtags on LinkedIn. And I just, highlighted some that I thought might be relevant for this group. We see things about International Women's Day and equality and inclusion. We see ESG, renewable energy. We see motivation. It's really good to do some research, and you can easily do this research yourself. You're probably curious, what hashtag would make sense for me? Well, first, when you see a post and there's a hashtag in the post and it will be blue, you can click it and it will take you to the hashtag page and it will show you other people using it and how many followers it has. And you can also do it directly from the search box at the top. Notice if I do the search box at the top of LinkedIn, I just type leadership, I can see that leadership is a hashtag, but also leadership development, leadership communications. And when I click leadership, you can see there to the right, it has like 3 million followers. That's a big conversation. It's a big conversation, and you may want to try to be part of that big conversation, but sometimes you may want to choose a conversation that's a little more nuanced. I work with a lot of public policy organizations. So if we use hashtag public service, look, we have 8,000 followers. Well, that may not be giant, but if you're talking about public service, the 8,000 people who have opted into following that are probably the people who you would want to see that information. So it's so easy for you to do this research and figure out who follows what. What if I say HQ2? We all know what that means in the DMV region. Well, when I look at that, it only has 60 followers at the time that I took the screenshot, at least. But when I look at what the posts are, I see a post from the publisher of the Business Journal sharing a post from Vandana, the editor of the Business Journal, talking about HQ2. I see posts from JBG Smith. Not everybody is really, this is their business, but if it is, well, gosh, these are the people who are paying attention to it. The 60 people who've opted into that are probably the 60 people who you might actually want to reach if you pay attention to this. So I just want you to find 3 to 5 that might make sense for you. I'm going to show a few more examples of things that I think are interesting on LinkedIn. One is participating in trends. I came across this. You may have seen the 10-year challenge on social media where people show a picture of themselves now and 10 years ago and look how great they look, they haven't aged, etc. Well, this guy did a 10-year challenge talking about the cost of lumber. He's in the lumber business from 2012 versus 2022, and how in 2022, $1,000 worth of lumber it's a lot less. It doesn't go as far. And he writes a whole post about this, and he's interested in some advocacy around this. And 27 people comment on this. He started a really great conversation with his network around this. He used a trend that already exists and sort of joined onto that. I wanted to share a personal example. I was at the the airport last week. And when I saw the bookstore, I noticed a friend of mine, Jennifer Brown, her book was in the airport bookstore. I just thought it was so cool because I've known her for a long time and she's worked so hard as an author. So I did a really quick post. I did this from my phone, waiting for my plane, that I was perusing the bookstore. I came across and I tagged her. I mentioned her. I used the hashtag Beyond Diversity for her book. And I mentioned an organization we're both involved in. Now, one of the comments back at the top, there was a friend of mine who has the same book, and he shared a picture of himself reading it, which I thought was really cool. But you know what else? Jennifer did a good job by responding. When somebody mentions you, the best practice is you want to join back in that conversation. So she responded back. But my favorite part about it was when my friend Nick at the Public Affairs Council said, I'll pick up a copy. Does she do public speaking? And I've introduced them, and she's going to be a paid speaker at their conference. So that all came, you say, what's the ROI of this? Well, in this case for Jennifer, me just being excited that I saw her book, mentioning Jennifer and sharing that with my network. I see that Emily on here saw this in her feed, which is awesome. And Jennifer got a speaking gig out of it. And even somebody else at the bottom says she's going to get the book. So just a small way you can feed your network and get that kind of mutual connectivity that you're looking for. What's the difference between a like and a comment and engagement? Ed asks, a good friend of mine asks a great question there. You can select like, and then you can choose a different reaction, like congrats, celebrating, etc. Likes are important because it tells you there's a difference between somebody scrolling through and going, okay, and somebody going, and they like it. They're telling you that there's a positive reaction, but it's very important for the algorithm. When somebody likes it, they put their foot on the gas pedal, and LinkedIn is going to, when more likes come in, the content is shown to more people. So the fact that something like this gets more likes, more people see it. It's just a way to feed that algorithm. So if you want to show somebody you care about something, react to it in that way, comment it on that way. Comment's a deeper type of engagement. It's rewarded even better, but those are things that feed the algorithm. Another way that you can really try to get your audience to engage beyond just a like is you can ask a poll question. And you can see a couple examples here. These are really great ways to ask your network, and using the right hashtags, you might get people who are far out of your network. I did one of these recently with a question about unvarnished marketing. And I was so excited to see that people who I was not connected to saw the poll and answered the question. It was related to a Wall Street Journal article about the brand Yeti. So this is a great thing for you to experiment with. Now I have to showcase Mary, who does such a great job with her LinkedIn and her podcast and everything, but also her LinkedIn Live on Fridays. And I was honored that she included me as one of her guests. This is a very powerful way when you're more advanced on LinkedIn to expand your reach. You can see when Mary invited me to be a speaker, I got this review request in the upper left corner. And what that does is it notifies my network when I accept and I'm listed as a speaker. And then you can see on the right, of course, what did I do? Well, then I share the post that I'm going to be part of this, and people in my network see it. And we had hundreds of people registered for this. I mean, Mary has quite a reach. And you can see that when we did the live event, it's really valuable from a business standpoint. I don't know exactly how Mary uses this data, but you can see on the right, you can see all, as a speaker and as an organizer, all 227 people who registered for the event, whether they attended or not. What a powerful thing for you if you're doing something for lead generation, you're building your network, you want to help people. You could imagine how a nonprofit could do this to build its audience. This is a really powerful way to reach more people on the platform, but also to capture that data, because the data is right there. It's very easy to see it just from the registration data. So I previewed that formula earlier, and I just want to share it here again about the 4 things we want to think about to maximize engagement. Number 1 is our asset. Are we sharing a link, which LinkedIn doesn't like? They don't want to send people to other websites. Or are we sharing a picture, a photo, an event, or an article that lives on LinkedIn? Anytime you do those things, it's going to perform better. Number 2, angles. What's my story angle here? If it's too cloudy about too many things, or I don't use the lingo to tell LinkedIn what I'm talking about, it's not going to know who to show it to, because they want to show people things that they care about. But when you use the right hashtags and the right language, you pick a story angle, it's going to perform better. Number 3, amplifiers. Who am I inviting to my party? Who am I mentioning? What people or organizations am I mentioning? When I mention them, they're more likely to like, to engage, to comment, to share, and that powers the algorithm to show it to more people. And then lastly, what I call avenues. These are trends, keywords, search terms, hashtags. But when it comes to LinkedIn, we're really talking about hashtags here. Have I researched a couple hashtags that have the right following? Remember earlier, we saw hashtag leadership has 3 million plus followers. HQ2 only has 60. But if I'm talking about a big project in HQ2, maybe I want to use that one, and maybe I want to use another one that's more general about development that's going on. Researching a few of these just by using the search box at the top, like I showed you, or even clicking hashtags in other people's posts to see how many followers they have, can really help you understand how many people follow that hashtag and what your potential reach might be. And again, this is just that example I showed you earlier. Now I show it again because as we walk through the examples, you might notice the difference even more. Notice all of those blue mentions that Alex uses on the left, getting almost 200 reactions and 18 comments. Notice on the right how he's missing some of those elements and he just doesn't reach as many people. It's probably because people didn't react as well, but also the algorithm didn't know what to do with it. This is another example I came across from CES recently. You can see on the left, the story angle here, it's like, hey, we just launched an app. And it's sort of like, okay, well, why would I care about that? Versus on the right, this is a really cool video of this woman interacting with this robot at CES. And she mentions people and companies, and she uses the right hashtags like artificial intelligence, CES, et cetera. So just a little difference, to these things, a little bit of mind shift to story driving can make a difference. And her post has over 20,000 likes. The other one had 0. No one reacted at all. I'm not going to go over all this, but I wanted to give you this slide. These are best practices across these 4 social media networks of how many hashtags to use, how many mentions, how long the post should be, how often you should post. And I have it all cited at the bottom if you want to dig into my homework. But on LinkedIn, the key takeaway here is really you only need to post infrequently. Once a day is a power user, but you don't want to ever go more than once a day. Versus on Twitter, you see people tweeting all the time, right? LinkedIn, if you're posting once a year now, let's try to get to once a month. If you're posting once a month, let's try to get to once a week, right? But it's okay if you're not posting every day. I don't post every day, but I'll have a couple times, some weeks I post. I'm more focused on engaging with other people and celebrating them and talking about, their successes and trying to elevate them. And I really believe that with 5 minutes a day, you can do that. I know Russ asked a great question earlier, and we can dive into this more about ROI. But look, the goal of this is, what's the ROI of going to a networking event? How do you measure the ROI of engaging with people who matter to you, who are at the center of your bullseye, right? It's sometimes a little difficult to do that. It's a little bit intangible, and you have to know what your business goals are. Are you trying to deepen relationships you already have? Are you trying to meet new people? You're going to have to figure that out. And then once you know that, by going to LinkedIn and just reviewing your feed, the people who are already in your network, you could search for a hashtag in your industry if you're wanting to pay attention to keep tabs on that, and then engaging with 3 posts a day. by commenting, by encouraging, giving encouraging feedback. Happy anniversary. Congratulations on your promotion. This is a great article. This makes me think of another article I read that I'll share with you. So cool, your book's in the bookstore. These types of things can make a huge difference to continue to feed your network and stay top of mind. And it's going to depend on you, what your goals are in your business. But in a few minutes a day, you can really achieve a network effect quicker than you could taking a taxi or an Uber across town to even get to that lunch with someone. You can complement those engagements digitally. And I'm going to review those takeaways we started with. There's 3 things I wanted you to take away from this. Number 1 is to start in the center. This is an amazing tool for you to document your own network. So I want you to upload that address book to make sure you're actually connected to the people you know. And I want you to engage the people at the center of your bullseye. If that's all you do, then you are winning. You don't need to go beyond that. Secondly, I want you to learn the lingo. And I hope you've taken away a little bit today about mentions and hashtags and how important they are for the artificial intelligence. And I hope you've taken away that there's just a couple little things that you can do to make a difference with how you're posting to optimize that post to reach more people. And then finally, a little can go a long way. I really believe 5 minutes a day on the app, you can make a difference. Killing time in the airport like I did can really help someone. And for me, that's what it's all about. How can I connect with my network and get people to help one another? So with that, I just want to point out that I do have this resource in here from LinkedIn to optimize your profile. It's their executive playbook. They have tons of resources, but I think this is the best one. So I put this in so that you can link to it. And what we're going to do for the next half hour for whoever wants to stay is I'm going to pull up LinkedIn and answer your questions and dive in. But in the meantime, I'm going to turn it back to Doug for an announcement before we switch to our sort of optional hands-on piece.
Anthony, thank you very much. We still have a couple of questions. One on fundraising on LinkedIn. Any best practices for that?
Yeah, great. Let's start there. So Brian, it's a great question because with fundraising, a lot of times we're trying to send people back to a website to give money or to register for something. And yet LinkedIn doesn't like us to send those people to those links. Where I've seen organizations succeed with fundraising is when they actually create an event on LinkedIn. They use the LinkedIn events feature to have registration there, and they drive people to that event. I've worked with some different groups who have used that feature to do some sort of live virtual thing, or they've used it for a gala. I know it's our instinct to say, well, but I have a registration page on my website for my gala. I want people to go there. Those posts are not going to perform as well. So that's one way to do it. The other thing is get your ambassadors for the event or the gala to upload videos to talk about why they're going, and then put the link in the comments. It's going to work way better if it's real content from real people and not just posting links. Those links just aren't going to perform as well.
And the question, I know you talked about this, but likes versus comments, which works better? Which should you encourage people to do, one or the other?
Yeah, I love asking a question and trying to get people to comment. But if people react with a like, they're feeding the algorithm and it's going to show it to more people. Anytime we look at any social movement, you're going to have 1% of people super engaged, 9% of people a little bit engaged, 90% of people are just going to be lurking and listening. That's just natural. So it's great to get those comments and encourage that, but the likes are going to power it and it's going to help reach those 90%.
And Mary Abijay's got, when should you post to everyone or just to connections and friends and followers?
Great question, Mary. I think our mentality should be that we're posting for our connections, but I think it makes sense for a lot of us to make those posts public so that anybody can see it. Now, if you're sharing a personal update about, a career change or something that you don't need everyone to know about, I would do that just for connections or connections and followers. But if I'm, posting about, my friend's book about diversity or the Wall Street Journal article, I make those public because I'm okay if other people join that conversation. So the question is it okay for others to join the conversation? If so, I say make it public.
Anthony, thank you again, everyone. We're going to go into about a half hour of hands-on demonstration here. But before we do that, we do have a survey for this session that we would love you to fill out for us to tell us how we're doing and where we can make improvement and what you liked. And also, as part of that survey, we are looking at doing a career and organizational development series in the future. And we've got a list of topics, potential topics for that series. And we'd like you to rate those for us as well, so we get an idea of what people are looking for as we plan this series. So please get on the link, fill out the survey, and let us know what you think. All right, Anthony, where we go from here?
Great. Well, I'm pulling up LinkedIn, and what I want to do is just show people a couple things, but really I'm going to respond to questions that you all have. So the first thing I want to recap is just that hashtag research that we talked about. You know, if you say, gosh, I work in, well, I'd love an example from somebody. Does anybody work in an industry where you'd love to just look at the hashtags together and see what we find? Because I kind of think it's fun to use real examples. And you can unmute yourself, I think, or you can use the chat. Disaster rebuilding, I see traffic safety, I say CSR. Let's start with CSR. So if I just search, notice when I type in here and I start CSR, even with CS, this immediately shows up at the top as a hashtag. So when I click CSR, the first thing I'm going to be thinking about are a couple things. Number one, how many people follow this hashtag? But number two, what are the related hashtags that I may want to pay attention to? Let me just move this down a little because I have the box at the top. So when I look at this one, I'm going to see, okay, hashtag CSR has 17,000 followers. And so that might be one that makes a lot of sense. It seems like it's a more niche audience, which I think is great. Now, as I look at these posts below, I can scroll down and notice here, I can sort by, let me zoom in because I bet you're not seeing this as good as I am because of my big monitor. Okay, so when I can sort this by top posts or recent posts. So sometimes I like to go by recent because I want to see what are people saying about this today and how often are they talking about it? Well, I can immediately see from this post related to, this bank, they are using hashtag ESG, which is, another kind of almost a synonym, I think I would say, for CSR. So if I were focused on that topic, I'm going to open that in a new tab to check it out. And you can see some other ones they've used, like social impact. I would think, they use CSR, of course, and we can just go through and see what are other people saying. And these are great opportunities for you to engage in conversations that are already happening. If I'm going to engage, I'd probably go back to sort it by top. And I would see, okay, in this case, this education project focused on CSR, maybe this is something that I want to comment on and say, oh, great, way to go, or, it depends on, what your strategy is here. Here's an example of a group in DC, the Bipartisan Policy Center, that I do some work with, and they're going to be at South by Southwest EDU, and you can see, and South by Southwest, and you can see one of their executives sharing that they're going to be there. So this would be a great opportunity to comment and say, these sound like great sessions. I'd love to learn more about it. But as we look at the hashtag research at the top, we can notice that ESG has 32,000 followers, and we can see social impact has 60,000. So if you're working in CSR, I'd want to ask, okay, I'd take a look. What are people saying using each of those hashtags? And which one should I use? Well, maybe I'm talking about CSR, but really social impact is relevant to the reason I'm talking about it. And that hashtag has a larger followership. So I might want to use social impact as the way that I talk about this. I would just pick a few that you want to focus on. And even if you turn on creator mode in LinkedIn, one of the questions it asks you is, what do you talk about? And you select a few hashtags to sort of educate your network in LinkedIn about what you talk about. You can see this is a very easy thing to do. You just go to the top and you search for it. When you search for a hashtag, it pulls up this link at the top. And just an easy thing that you can do, I'll paste it in the chat, is you can just take that exact link that I have and you can just replace that last word, social impact. So I noticed somebody said supply chain. So I'm going to replace that with supply chain. And I just wonder how many people, oh, wow, there's over 200,000 people talking about supply chain. So that's a big conversation that's happening right now. Again, that means 200,000 people have clicked that button and said, LinkedIn, I want to see information related to supply chain. They've asked for that to be fed to them. And again, I'm going to go through and see, well, what are people saying about this? And notice in this post about supply chain, she's talking about also renewable energy and energy transition. And so, Brian, I would ask, gosh, do those make sense related to what you're working on? Or is it something completely different? These are things that you might want to ask yourself as you're going through. And this is just a promoted post. This is an ad from Cole Haan. You can see that it says promoted at the top. So that one doesn't necessarily include the hashtag. And you can just continue to go through and see, what are people saying when it comes to this topic of supply chain? And are these conversations that matter for me? National Association of Home Builders is based in DC. They've shared something here recently related to supply chain. using real estate and using economy. So they're obviously coming at it from a little bit of a different angle there. So yeah, I see a question coming in. Let me check it out. If you have a wide following but want to narrow your feed, how might you do this? You're trying to customize your feed to your main interests. Yeah, great question, Michael. So one of the things you can do just on your home screen is there's things you can do to broaden your following. So following or broaden your feed, right? So following a hashtag, following a person, following a company, that's going to show you more from them. But there are other things you can do to narrow it. So let's look at my feed here, and let's see. I find I don't want to necessarily unfollow anybody at this moment, but let's say I see this post from Christina, social media strategist. She's sharing something about this, and let's say I don't want to see, I'm not, Christina's great. If I didn't want to see posts from Christina, we all have those people where we don't necessarily want to see it. You can click this 3 dots, and there's a few options. Let's say I want to stay friends with this person, but I just don't want to see their stuff anymore. If it's a spammer, you can remove the connection, but you can say unfollow her and you won't see anything from her. But you can also just say, I don't want to see this. And in fact, when you do that, if LinkedIn has deemed that the post is political, it now actually gives you an option. They just had a cool feature about this in the Wall Street Journal last week, where it can say, I don't want to see political content. And you can select that. But in this case, I could just say, I don't want to see this post. And then it will learn. And after a while, it starts to learn maybe what do these posts have in common? Why do you not want to see them? So this is something that you can do to sort of declutter your feed a little bit. The other main thing that I think you might want to think about for a lot of you is don't accept connections from people who you don't want to be connected to. If they're strangers, a lot of times it might be just like a salesperson. Ignore that. I know a lot of people feel like they have to accept every connection on LinkedIn, but I'm kind of the opposite. I really don't want to accept your connection unless I know you. And if I don't know you, but you look really interesting, like maybe I should, I'll immediately respond with a question about like, hey, how can I help you? Why'd you reach out? And if it's like, I reached out to sell you some software, then I usually just, I disconnect from them, because I think it's a good way to keep our feeds cleaned up. I hope that answers your question, Michael. Yeah, or they can be bots for sure. There's a lot of they're not as bad of a bot problem on LinkedIn compared to other platforms, but certainly it happens. Let's see. I see a question on here, a couple questions about LinkedIn groups. So years and years ago, I hosted a workshop that featured Peter Panapento, who set up the group for the Chronicle of Philanthropy. And they had a really successful, probably still do, group of tens of thousands of people. And he shared some great advice that, I'm citing him because it's not my own experience, it's his experience, that when he created a group, it was really important to have strong moderation. And it was really important to give something to members of that group rather than just trying to sell them their products and services, to give them sort of special offers and opportunities to connect with one another. But his key lesson was you had to really strongly moderate that group, because you had to have rules about what you can post and what you can't. And when people break the rules, you got to have a warning and kick them out. Because if a group becomes spammy, there won't be very many people active in it. LinkedIn groups, I think, can be very powerful, but there are a lot of groups that people are not very active in. I'm a member of alumni groups, I'm a member of things, but I personally don't interact in them a lot. More likely, every once in a while, I might see a notification from my, GW MBA alum group or something like that. But creating your own group, I think it can be effective if your people are there, but their lesson was you have to have really strong guidelines and moderation, and you really have to keep tabs on that. They also did a lot of things where they would ask questions that were really relevant to the group members to spark conversation. And then they would give them preview access to things like webinar series that they were doing. So, that's a few things I know about LinkedIn groups. I've seen, I think, more success, frankly, with Facebook groups than LinkedIn groups, just based on how a lot of people use LinkedIn on a regular basis. So I think I got those questions. Let's see. One of you tell us what I did right and wrong. Mary, oh, sure, Mary, let's check it out. So Mary says she mentioned me in a post. We're going to do a real live thing. So far, so good. It's looking great. The first thing I noticed is she has this screenshot here, right? So she's used a picture instead of a link, which is great. She's mentioned me. So you noticed how I got that notification at the top here. I got mentioned, right? If Mary had said my name, but not mentioned me with the @ sign, I wouldn't get this. But this tells me, and if my email settings are such, I might even get that in my email inbox. She's mentioned Leadership Greater Washington. Now, in this case, she's mentioned LinkedIn. And Mary, I would say, for feedback on this, mentioning LinkedIn could be good because, it might show it to other people who follow LinkedIn. But if you mention someone and they don't react, then it kind of hurts the post. So my view is I'm going to try to mention people and organizations who I think would react. So mentioning LGW makes total sense because, let's hope that they will see this and like and comment, but LinkedIn probably won't. And so you could have perhaps left that off, or maybe instead use the hashtag for LinkedIn, because you care less about the organization seeing it and more about the topic of people who pay attention to the conversation about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an organization, but LinkedIn is also a conversation topic. The conversation topic might have made better sense. The other thing is, I love that you shared the 4 A's here. And something that we can do on LinkedIn is we can actually bullet things that sometimes make it easier. So instead of having those in a series, you might think about putting them in a bulleted list. And let me just show you a real quick cheat on how to do that. So let's say I go to Emojipedia. This is my little shortcut. And let's say, because I talk about the bullseye, I could just type any word and it shows me emojis. And I can, actually, I think it's technically emoji is the plural. So I can copy this little bull, you can see a bunch of other emoji here. And then I can go back to my post and let me just go to the top here and start a new one. And then in my post, if I wanted to create a bulleted list, I could just use the copy and paste feature like this. So this is just something that helps to make your content stand out a little bit more, makes it a little bit easier to digest for your audience. So that's sort of a small difference that you could have done there, Mary. Now, I love how you mentioned some of the other people who were here today and that this was a really kind of great way to do that. And also, I love how you used the different relevant hashtags here. And when I look at like social business, LinkedIn networking, I would just want to see, gosh, which of these hashtags, do people follow them? And I can just right click them and open each of them. And we can just see social business has 1,200 followers. LinkedIn networking has 1,000 followers. Thank you has 93,000. Thought Leader has 1,304. And, maybe hashtag LinkedIn would have been a good addition to replace the company mention because it has over 1 million followers. So just doing a little quick hashtag research can kind of make a difference to help you expand the reach. So I like this. I will like this post. I will comment on it later. We see Carrie already engaging. Thank you so much. And I think this is definitely an A+ post, Mary, and there's always little things we can do. So hopefully that feedback gives you some ideas for other things that you can do. I see Stacy asked a really important question, and I have some important information on this one, Stacy. Is there a way to filter those who are trying to connect with you? Yes, there is. I'm going to see if I can find it because these settings always move around. But if you really want to get locked down, you can actually make it so that the people who connect with you have to have your email address. So notice under settings, under communications, under who can reach you, invitations to connect, choose who can connect with you. For mine, it's everyone. Maybe I should change that. But you can, and then you can see invitations from your network. That would be like an invitation to an event. But you can click change, and it can be everybody. It can be only people who know your email address or appear in your imported contacts list, or only people who appear in your imported contacts list, which means even if they know your email address, they can't do it. If you really are liking, wanting to limit it, I would check this second option and make it so people have to know your email address or appear in your imported contacts list. That would be a good way for you to filter it further. I hope that's helpful, Stacy. All right, I see a question here from Adam. 5 minutes a day guideline, but it takes me forever just to scroll through the recent posts. How do you handle that? Yeah, Adam, I'll tell you, I think part of this is figuring out your timing. When do you want to do this? I find that for me, I use LinkedIn during sort of some dead times. Like if I have like 10 minutes between meetings, right? Where I can't really work on a big task, or, microwave my lunch, or, I have found that for me, there's a few times a day that I like to go through and I just like to check. And the first thing I always do is I'm going to go in, I'm going to check my notifications, and I'm just going to say, okay, who's already engaging with me? Again, we can see this Mary post getting engagement. Thank you, Mary. And I can see other things that people have shared. And, in this case, for example, Megan Brewster is somebody who I work with, and she has shared something here. So let's click it. And she shared a post from someone else, and it's about this new initiative from JP Morgan about Black women are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the type of thing that I would say, oh, I would like to engage with that. You can see it looks like this is actually a LinkedIn article, which we talked about, right? So this article is from, it's actually a newsletter they set up, lives in LinkedIn, and it's an article there, and they have a lot of subscribers for that. So that might be something that I would choose to engage with. But I'm going to just start there. If you only spend time focused on your notifications right now, I think that's an okay place for you to be. And then when you write a post, just take time. I'd rather you write fewer posts and be much more substantive. But if you're feeling overwhelmed with it, I want your 5 minutes a day to be going through your news feed, looking at the notifications and engaging with other people. And I don't want you to worry about writing the post yet. I think you can accomplish so much by uplifting and engaging with other people. They will notice it before you start talking about your own stuff too much. Let's see, I see something over in the comments here from Stacy, a survey style post with most important characters to look for in a wealth manager. Stacy, let me just show you a recent LinkedIn poll post that I did. I have found that these really perform better from people than organizations, but you can do them from an organization as well. And so I just read this really interesting thing in the Wall Street Journal about Yeti and the fact that they used really authentic, unvarnished marketing. So I wrote this post. I probably spent less than 10 minutes on this. I said, does unvarnished marketing, such as photos from real customers, work better than polished ads? Notice I start with a question at the top, because when somebody's scrolling through the feed, they won't see the whole thing. So they'll just see that first line. So I wanted to get the point across really quickly. I mentioned Yeti. I also mentioned this Peter Fisk, this professor who was quoted in the article, and he, because I mentioned him, liked my post and voted in my poll. So thinking about how you can engage people. And then here's my poll. Do you think unvarnished marketing content works better than the polished stuff? Had 74 votes. And as I suspected, the vast majority thought that unvarnished marketing was very effective. It also got a lot of comments, and you could see different people commenting on this and sharing their points of view. People who work in my industry, people who I work with, Jill sharing her reaction, specific examples about her company, et cetera. So we had a real conversation going on about this, which I found helpful. So I think that would be a great thing for you to experiment with, Stacy. But think about it from the angle of, what are they going to care about? Of course, you'd love them to tell you how, your business can market to them better. But think about what they might be interested in, what might catch someone's attention and entice them. And those are the types of questions that I would want to ask. Looks like Brian has a question over here. A lot of annoying advertising shows up in your feed. Absolutely. It's a great question, Brian. Usually I do think that if you may have to do it repeatedly, tell LinkedIn, I don't want to see this anymore. So how can you do that? You can see this ad that I'm seeing from Sendoso, and I can click the 3 dots and I can say, if it's inappropriate, you can report the ad. There's a question here. It says, improve my feed. And I can click that. And this really just takes you to your network where it lets you follow people, and you can follow hashtags and so forth. I thought that you could, maybe they took it away. I thought you could say that you didn't want to see this ad. I guess report this ad. It says, I don't want to see this ad in my feed. So I can report it and say, I think it's annoying, or I've seen the same ad too often. And I do think you will get a reaction from that, because the goal of they want to learn to not waste money showing things to the wrong people. And are you going to see fewer ads though? No, unfortunately, I think they're going to keep advertising, because that's one of the ways that they earn revenue. But if you can teach it to show you more relevant advertising, then hopefully that's a win-win. Any other questions that folks have? We have a few more minutes if you're interested about how to do anything or find anything. I'm happy to show you whatever I can. And if not, I know we're going to have the recording and the slides available for everyone. And certainly you're welcome to reach out to me. Hey, you can even add me on LinkedIn if you want, and let me know that that I was here. It looks like one person raised their hand. I see the hand, but I can't see who it is. Let's see, Ernest, can you unmute?
Ernest, can you put your question in the chat or the Q&A?
Oh yeah, you might not be able to unmute, so you can put it in the chat. What makes a good profile came in from Mary. So Mary, I think the best thing on a profile is, I want it to be complete so that people can, find you. And really that 10-step guide that I linked to at the end of the deck that from LinkedIn, I mean, I'm not going to be able to do better than them. But look, for me, having a background image and a nice headshot from a bio point of view, I think it's really nice if you write that in first person rather than third person. The only reason maybe not to do that is sometimes for someone like you, Mary, who's a speaker, people might go copy and paste from this. So you might want to make it available, but we all know we put our own in there. So I find that that's a nice touch and something that we hear about. And then the other thing you can do is under featured, you can choose here to add other posts and articles and things you've done that show up at the top. So these are featured things that people will see when they're reviewing your profile. I'd also encourage you that, under your experience, include, I don't think I have yet, but include LGW, that you're part of LGW, include volunteer opportunities. These are going to make it easier for LinkedIn to find what networks you're in. Now, Ernest had a quick question about upgrading your membership. Ernest, there's a few benefits of having the premium membership of LinkedIn. One is if you want your content to be seen by more people, it lets you turn on a public mode that's not available to everyone. It's going to let you see more connections if you do a search, like second and third degree, especially third degree connections. Your search is limited. So if you're doing prospecting or something, that's important. It's going to give you more access to LinkedIn Learning. So you'll have access to all of the free, wonderful resources, such as Mary Abijay's course that she has on LinkedIn Learning. You get that for free. And then you can send more in-mail credits. If you're just engaging with your network at the center and you're not using LinkedIn Learning and you're not trying to reach new people right now, I'd say you don't need it. If you're really using it for recruiting or sales, or you're really proactively building your network and you want to be able to see those searches, who's viewed your profile and send messages to others, then I would say it might be worth doing a trial to check it out. I hope that's helpful. I know some folks have to go, so thank you all. Let's see. Brian, you mentioned you asked about featuring links and how they don't like it. We want to do a showcase of thought leadership. Yeah, so I will say links to news sources do perform better than links like well-recognized websites do tend to perform better. So it's okay to do that sometimes. If you have a thought leadership piece in the New York Times, okay, great, let's share that. But literally, I'm telling you, the research shows if you took a picture of that op-ed in the New York Times and you posted that picture as a graphic and you put the link in your comment instead, it would perform better. What I would do if you have a thought leadership piece you want to promote is I would write 3 bullets that summarize the high points so that even if I don't click it, I get the message. Because what's your goal with thought leadership? You want people to get the message. I would share an image or a video that's related to that, a picture of the piece, a cryon from the newspaper, whatever it is, and I'd put the link that somebody can go read the full article in the comments. According to our research around the algorithm, that is going to perform best for you. Great question about the audio offering, Ed. I'm interested in it. I'm hearing about it. I haven't done anything with it, so I don't know much yet. But I think that it has the potential to be successful because our research shows that heavy LinkedIn users are also heavy podcast listeners. There's some overlap, so I think that there might be some interesting success they could have. But I don't know much about it beyond that. Edward is asking about difference in engagement for organic LinkedIn posting. Yeah, Edward, some of these third-party posting platforms, they make it really hard to mention it's fine to use the hashtags, but they make it really hard to find and mention people and companies. So we have found that the performance tends to be better when you post organically in LinkedIn, particularly from people, because remember, people's content performs better than companies' content. So while you can pre-schedule these things, sometimes you'll see they don't come through right, and you see @ a name, it's not bold, it's not linked, and you really lose opportunity there. So if your aggregator allows you to do that, then good. But I know some of them, there's a problem where it doesn't always work. And then I'd rather see you do it organically so that you can get those mentions in there. Thank you all for the nice comments. I'm really love that we have so many great questions and so much discussion. Oh my gosh, this is fabulous. If you have any more, I'll take them. But otherwise, I hope to see you active on LinkedIn. I'll pay attention to it. And I just want to say thanks to LGW. I feel so grateful to be part of LGW, Doug and Debbie and the whole team. So thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much. This has really been a tremendous presentation today. We've got a lot of questions answered. A lot of people are going to engage a lot more with LinkedIn. So thank you for all this. It really has, as Mary Abijay just put in the chat, this has been so fabulous. So thank you so much, Anthony. You will be getting a copy of all of the slides, the presentation. You'll be getting a video recording of this for you to take a look at as well. So thank you all for that. And I just want to thank everyone for coming up. The Leadership Greater Washington is thrilled to be able to present this through the support of the Shared Humanity Project with Mark Burgell. And it's a great advantage for our members. So thank you all. And we'll see you at the next LGW gathering. Thank you.